Metaphor ReFantazio. This game is great. Being able to customize each and every character to be whatever you want is something awesome. But what if I took away the one thing that lets us do most attacks or make our team stronger? Can you beat Metaphor ReFantazio without an archetype? So let's find out. First, to answer this question, we need to put some rules in place. So what are the rules? 1. I cannot use the Archetype skill menu during battles, or the skill menu outside battles. But even though I can't use skills, I'm still able to deal damage using basic weapon attacks and magic items. Additionally, I am able to switch between archetypes to get different passive skills and affinities. 2. I have to do this challenge on the hardest difficulty, Regicide. Unfortunately, the only way to play this mode is by using New Game Plus, and this gives us all our items from the previous playthrough. So I'll have to sell all my previous items as soon as possible so I don't gain any advantages for battles. Since we don't unlock any shops until after the first dungeon, I can only use items I have found during this current run, so I will be counting all the items I have and have a counter that'll show up on the side of the screen sometimes until I am able to sell my items. I'll talk a little bit more about this rule later because there is an unavoidable exception to this rule. Also, since I'm using New Game Plus, I have a bunch of money, mag, and my royal virtues are maxed. These don't change the run too much though, since money and mag are infinite resources, and the royal virtues being maxed doesn't actually make much of a difference. They'll all get upgraded just by playing the game, and we don't even need to max any of them out. But with all that out of the way, we can now start the game where our main character is laying down in the Tradia Desert. We pretty much get into the gameplay immediately and start picking up some items sitting on the ground. I also wanted to see if I can grind for XP and get enemy drops before we even get into combat, so I lured an enemy over to this small space and hacked away until we defeated it. Unfortunately, we get absolutely nothing out of this, so I just decided to run on over to Grand Trad, where we are locked from exploring and are forced to go to the recruitment center. In the recruitment center, we can name our main character a very original name, Meta 4. After this, we get put straight into battle and we gain our first teammate, Stroll. And something to note about the first area of this game is that we don't have an archetype yet, but we still have access to skills because we have a magic igniter. But according to my rules, we can't use this, but Stroll does not know I don't want to use this. So he'll just use his igniter whenever he wants since we can't control him yet. To stop this from happening, I just changed the auto battle tactics, and that seemed to do the trick. My strategy to get past all the enemies was to attack them a few times in the overworld, and then go into battle once they're low enough so we can beat them in one turn to get unscathed triumph bonuses. Every time I leveled up during these battles, I thought I'd start trying to build strength. Since I can't use any magic, this is the only type of damage I can really do, so I'm going to want to build it up as best I can. Eventually, I defeated every single enemy in this area and found a total of 3 medicines, 12 medicinal herbs, and 1 revival medicine. And I would have grinded for XP here, but I can't reload any of the enemies, so we have to fight the first boss at level 3. The first phase of this boss does not really matter. The damage you do will always be the same, and Stroll is supposed to get knocked down. After that, Meta can awaken to his archetype, and all that really matters to us right now is the full heal we get and the stat boost we get from New Game Plus, since I already got the max level for the Seeker archetype in my previous run. Anyways, this boss battle shouldn't be too difficult. We deal around 20 damage every hit, and we take around 30 damage each turn. The enemy has some healing, but he can only use it once during this boss battle, while we can use it multiple times. Unfortunately, this didn't work out the way I wanted it to. I eventually ran out of heals and died. After retrying and retrying this battle, nothing really seemed to work. We take too much damage, and even with our strength as our best stat, we don't do nearly enough to beat the battle. So I wanted to see if changing my stats would change the outcome. I went back into the dungeon, but this time I pressed I've always been lucky before choosing Meta's name so he'd have a boosted luck stat in the hopes I'd get critical hits more often so we'd get more turns and deal more damage. Unfortunately, 0 crits were hit, so I decided to try boosted endurance instead. I started the battle off by guarding a few times, I'd take less damage from attacks, and all the damage I would have done anyways wouldn't have mattered since the boss heals on turn 2. I started dealing damage up until I got below 60 HP. This was so I could maximize my usefulness of my 3 medicines. And I did this until I ran out of medicine and had to switch to the herbs. Using this strategy, I was slowly making progress at depleting the boss's health bar, but it was so much slower using the herbs, since I was taking around 30 damage each turn and could only heal 50. Thankfully, by playing the endurance game, we were able to defeat our first boss battle and meet up with Grius, who will be helping us out a bit with physical moves. He takes Meta and Stroll to an area with a bunch of enemies we can easily defeat for some experience. We also run into someone selling and buying items for us, which allows us to sell everything in my inventory. We also run into some soldiers who shouldn't be too difficult, but for some reason, Meta decides to attack using the wind skill Psych for absolutely no reason. I didn't even get a menu to cancel out of it, this move is just automatic. So I tried to see if I could stop it. The first method I tried was to make sure my tactics were changed so we could only do basic attacks. Didn't work. I tried to see if I could change the order of my skills so it wouldn't use wind, and I don't think that feature exists, but I tried. And finally, I tried to see if it used any MP as a test, so I kept spamming heals after taking damage, and once I got under 4 MP, I went back into the battle and Meta still attacked. How? This shouldn't be possible, but it is. And I don't think it counts toward the challenge. I didn't use the Archetype menu, I didn't lose any MP, and I had no say in using this move. But Seeker clearly shows up and uses the move, right? Well, I actually have a reason to believe this attack wasn't done by Seeker. Later on in this game, we'll grow bonds with characters and sometimes we'll unlock ambush moves like Bombardier or the opening volley move we've been using after stunning an enemy. These all happen automatically at the beginning of a battle and cost no MP, but this is still the same Psych in Seeker's skill list. Or is it? What if I told you this Psych isn't Psych, but a completely different hidden skill that is only used this singular time? There is a sheet created by Kim Katamura that shows all the skills in the game along with their hex codes, and if we scroll down the Psych, we can see there is not only one, but 2 of them. Maybe it's a mistake. It happens. But let's just check the actual code just in case. Sure enough, it's there. Psych 1 and Psych 2. Both having different traits to them. The first 3 columns here is the skill type, the 8th one here is the MP cost, and the number in the 60s under column 4 is the accuracy, 63 being 99% and 64 being 100%. But the only thing that really matters here for us is these first 3 columns. If it says 000202 like Psych 1, that usually means it's a skill attack, 000302 usually being healing, and 010202 always being ambush attacks, just like Psych 2. So that Psych attack that will always occur no matter what changes are made isn't actually Seeker using a skill, simply because he does not have it. So this means we have not failed the challenge yet, and we can beat this easy fight. Maybe it's Copium, but Seeker did not do this attack. After that fight, we can move on to the Nord Mines, where we can defeat some soldiers and find Captain Klinger, who initially took us to the first dungeon, but just kind of left us there. So now we have to battle him, and this is where Stroll awakens to his archetype, and we're really going to have to rely on it for this fight, since Klinger uses fire attacks that one-shots Meta. So I just played Endurance here, since Stroll can tank every single hit of fire damage. After beating this battle, we obtain our very first bond rank with Stroll, and this is going to be very important later on because bonds give us more abilities and archetypes. At this point, we're also able to buy from another shop and buy some weapons. And speaking of weapons, I realized something weird when I switched Meta's archetype from Seeker to Mage. Why do I have this giant staff that does 420 damage? I thought I sold everything from my last playthrough, but I guess this thing slipped through the cracks. And that is because certain items in this game cannot actually be sold, some of which being really overpowered at this point in the game. So this is where I add Rule 3. Just don't use these strong weapons on bosses. If you switch a character's archetype, the strongest weapon in your inventory will automatically be equipped, so it's really easy to just have one in play. I will not be using these though. Anyways, there isn't anything too interesting about this part of the Nord Mines. I just grind XP from these enemies and buy some items from the shop. After that, we can head through this door and fight the boss Homo Fuculo. And since this guy's attacks are mostly fire, I decided to put Meta and Grace on the warrior class so we could resist fire and just play endurance. During this battle, I was also able to use some magic items that are pretty much like using a skill, but instead of using actual magic, we're just throwing ice cubes. Something interesting to note about these magic items, though, is that they will always deal the amount of damage they say they will, regardless of defense bonuses, weaknesses, or resistances, except for the very first boss because they will do 3 damage. After this battle, we can attempt to fight against a boss, but since we don't have any skills that we can use, I'm pretty sure this might be impossible. Thankfully, this boss is optional, so we can just run out of the Nord Mines and return to Grand Trad to meet Grius' family and start a bond with Maria, who gives us access to the healer archetype. We can also buy armor and more weapons from the shops here, but we do have to sleep on this day so we can go to the royal funeral in the morning to try to beat the main villain of this game, Luis, because he killed the king. Unfortunately for us, Grius starts lagging the second he jumps into action and gets banned from ranked for a week. So now we can't use Grius anymore. And right after that, one of Luis's followers, Zorba, spawns in some skeletons to fight us. These enemies don't have much health we need to get through, but since there's so many of them, it gets a little overwhelming at the start. But overall, it's really not that bad. Right after this battle, we meet Hulkenberg, who knows Grius, and we follow her into the Grand Cathedral to stop the enemy. This dungeon doesn't really have anything to note. We defeat enemies, grab items, and finally reach another boss battle against evil Grius. And at the start of the battle, Hulkenberg awakens to her archetype and opens up to using the Knight, which is a really good archetype because of the passive skills we can access later on in the game. Anyways, this battle isn't that bad. It's mainly endurance again, but Grius hits really hard, so our turns usually consist of 2 heals and a singular attack. Eventually, we can get past this fight and reach our free time phase where we can explore the city, use the shops, and raise our bonds. We also get a few notable tasks that will help us on our journey. I decided I wanted to try out a bullish embargo as our first mission to complete. Getting through the area before the boss was really easy, but when I fought the boss, I immediately died, so I ended up trying to grind for XP, and then I went to the shops to get some more items, including magic items, which makes the bullish embargo boss crazy easy. With the bullish embargo task out of the way, we can start our bond rank with Brigitte and gain access to the merchant archetype. This is one of the best archetypes normally, but I don't really have much use for it in this challenge yet besides the money gain, but I will keep it in mind for later. Anyways, I went back to the Grand Cathedral and absolutely destroyed every enemy in my path. This lets us reach the top of the cathedral to fight against Zorba, and he keeps spawning in enemies that are just there to waste our turns. So I decided to play endurance again, so I can heal when I need to and attack when there's extra space in between healing. But this did not work at all. Zorba is extremely strong, and I really wish there was a way I could deal more damage. I might be overlooking something, but our basic attacks don't really do much, so I'm just relying on magic items. I was using Triple Knight though, so I decided to go for a Triple Brawler instead, since almost all the attacks actually hitting us are from the undead enemies punching us. So now we take half the damage we usually would because of this simple change, and we can also play Endurance successfully. After this, Zorba revives a human that has been sitting patiently in Grand Trad, and we get a little time to prepare before the fight, so I go Triple Knight again before going up against the boss. Usually it's recommended to destroy its shell first so you can get some free damage done to the heart while it's stunned. I think this is mainly because you can't use physical attacks while the boss isn't stunned, but we're just using magic items, so who cares? Easy fight. Now that we're done with the first big boss, we get a few days of free time that I use to strengthen my bonds. After those free days are done though, we are told there is going to be a tournament that should help with choosing a king. And the first task we're supposed to do is bring home the biggest bounty. And one of these bounties is to capture a kidnapper named Heisme all the way in Martira. So Hulkenberg calls up her buddy Nearest to drive us to Martira using a gauntlet runner. And this gauntlet runner is pretty useful. We can sweep the floor to get HP bonuses, we can cook food to do literally anything, and we can fish or take a bath later on in the game. Anyways, while on the gauntlet runner, sometimes we will run into enemies and have to fight. but these usually aren't too bad, so we can reach Martyra without issue. The first thing we do here is get a little bit more information about Heisme, and eventually we reach the cave Heisme is supposedly living in, but have a run-in with the Homo Butera instead. We don't need to kill it or anything though, we just need to deal enough damage so it'll go underground and then eat us. This is a interesting part of the game, but we can escape through the backside, and then finally enter Heisme's cave, where we get into a fight with him that I don't think we can actually lose. After we defeat him, we find out he isn't the kidnapper, so we head back to Martyra and go into the dungeon of this area. And this is where Heisme awakens to his archetype. The enemies we fight here can easily be taken out by throwing some ice at them. And afterward, we can explore the rest of the dungeon, and it goes by pretty smoothly. Most fights that are supposed to be difficult can just be won by spamming magic items. It's honestly super broken. And since I wanted to become more broken, I decided I wanted to try to inherit a healer passive skill to everyone called Healing Insight, which unlocks at rank 20 and allows us to heal a bit of HP every turn. And since all of my team is using the same archetype lineage, we can play the endurance game very, very well. And this brings us to the boss battle of this dungeon. We discover the person behind the kidnappings is Joanna, the leader of Martyra, and she's been feeding the victims to the enemy we need to defeat, Homo Jaluso. And like all the other battles, this is an endurance game. So after beating the boss, we have some free days to do whatever we want until we need to get to Brylehaven to show off our bounty and get noticed by Luis. And now he thinks it's okay for us to explore his Skyrunner, the Charadrius. The enemies in this ship can't be fought normally. We can just one-shot them until we reach mini-bosses that we do have to actually fight. And like the rest of the bosses we've encountered, we can just play endurance. Or not? What is this? I didn't know I'd actually have to, play by a time limit. I thought I could just play endurance for the whole game. But I guess I can use some brain power for this fight. So here's my strategy. Go for critical hits and let the enemy damage himself. This battle is against Sergeant Xanth, and usually in boss battles, the enemy is immune to status effects like Paralyze or Charm, but Xanth is actually more susceptible to those effects according to the information we have on him. So on my first turn, I could give him Hex and remove my ally's armor so he could deal more damage to us and himself, since Hex deals half the amount of damage dealt to an opponent. I also went to the Gauntlet Runner to cook up some critical meatballs, as well as give everyone on the team Diligent Disciple and Heat Up to upgrade crit chance and damage. These boosts are also upgraded even further since we have a Quad Knight team. But I'm not done yet. We also use Corrosive Acid to lower Xanth's defense so we can deal 600 damage critical hits with Meta. I also gave Hulkenberg and Heisme accessories that make guarding cost half a turn so Meta could attack more frequently. So with all this setup, we can just barely squeak out a win. And beating this battle gives us two choices for the next boss we can fight. We can go to either Chief Seba or Sergeant Gelcom, and I went for Gelcom because Seba uses physical barriers, so we'd only be able to deal magic damage to him. In Sergeant Gelcom's fight, he is the first person to attack, and something important happens during this first attack. Meta reflects it, and that's all thanks to the Knight class. During my free time, I was able to grow my bond with Hulkenberg up to 7, which grants access to both the Paladin and Dark Knight. These archetypes can give us the skill Counter and Magic Counter, which give us a 15% chance of reflecting an attack. So I'm hoping to get the whole team to have both these skills, so we'll always have the chance to completely get rid of an enemy's turn, since reflecting damage will remove all turn crystals. Anyways, I didn't really do anything special for this fight. I don't really think he had all that much health, but after the battle, we can head towards the final battle on the Skyrunner Charadrius against Chief Salva and Helmsman Cabio. The thing is, I had a hard time getting one of these guys down in 3 turns. There is no way this is going to be possible, but I still had to try, and try I did. But throughout multiple attempts, I'm not even close to winning. The closest I got was getting Salva down, but I still have a whole nother enemy to get rid of. So I thought maybe grinding for XP could help out with this. So I decided to do some missions and put Meta in the Merchant class, so we'd at least get some money and items out of it. But I actually forgot to switch back to Knight before going to the boss, so I was stuck using Merchant. I was hoping to quickly get my team wiped so we can start over with Quad Knight, but for some reason, when I threw an Ice Cube, it dealt 120 damage instead of the 100 damage it promises to hit. What? For whatever reason, I read a skill's description completely wrong. Merchant's skill Trader's Summit is a skill that reads increases effects of consumables by 1.2 times. increases further if archetypes of the same lineage are present. I thought this was only for healing items. I didn't know this counted for all items. And I'm right. This doesn't work on most food items. It is specifically for heals and magic items. This means the 100 damage we've been carried by this whole time would have dealt 200 damage if I gave my team this skill. I had such a hard time on Zorba. I could have defeated him in like 3 turns. But now that we know this, the 3-turn boss battle that seemed impossible was easy. Now we have some free days to do whatever I do, and then go into the Shradrius once our free days are up. And while we're here, we get into a scrap with one of the throne candidates, Gladel. And as you can guess, it is easy. And do you want to know what else is easy? The entirety of the next section of the game. We have multiple bosses we need to get through, with 2 of them being against Luis. And it's all really easy. But after defeating Luis for the second time, we go to this area called the Ancient Elden Sanctum, and in here we find this guy that looks a little bit like Meta, and they fuse together to make Meta with brighter hair and a different accent for this one text box.
I feel fine, I think.
Totally normal video game trope. This literally happened 2 videos ago. After fusing, we have a lot of free time. All we have to do is go into a dungeon 1 time within the next month, and then fight the final boss on the last day. So during my free time, I decided to cook up some food, with one of the most important ones being stale black bread, which does 300 almighty damage normally, and 900 with Merchant's Trader's Summit and Tycoon's Item Connoisseur. The other most important food item is the Sublime Spoonful, which gives us 4 extra turn icons, and is the only food item in the game with ingredients that cannot be bought at shops. It requires 3 Queen's Honey Jars and 1 Lord of the Lake, which can be obtained by fishing, and 3 Gauntlet Shrooms, which is an item that has a chance to show up on the Gauntlet Runner each day, and I just reloaded my save a bunch of times to rig the RNG. This is a fairly demanding meal to make, but since we've maxed out Maria, every time we cook we'll get an extra plate of that meal on the house. In addition to all the cooking, I accepted some challenge quests where we have to visit 3 towers to defeat 3 dragons. Each of these dragon battles require a little bit of setup to do. For the Devourer of Nations, all we need to do is pick up some fire-repelling boots and a fire-nullifying vest. This helps us with removing the 8 turn icons this guy has, and since we're using the Knight class, anytime this boss tries to inflict us with an ailment, we can just instantly recover. For the second fight against the Devourer of Stars, we are only allowed to deal damage using Almighty, and we have stale black bread to help us with that. And even then, at the beginning of this boss battle, one of our bonds, Katharina, uses an ambush move to delete a third of the boss's health bar. For the third and final dragon battle, we're up against the Devourer of Flames, and this guy's gimmick is that we can get hit at any time by an attack that deals 9,999 damage. But since we have gear to negate that, it doesn't really affect us. After defeating all 3 dragons, we unlock the battle against the Elegy of the Soul, and I went into this fight pretty underleveled, but I still got past it first try. The Elegy of the Soul boss battle is supposed to be difficult because there's unspoken rules that you can't break, and those rules are just to not nullify or reflect any damage. But that doesn't even matter if we're using the Knight class, because we still do that, and we don't get the penalty. So all we have to do now is go into the Skybound Avatar and fight our way through the same way we always have, and then reach Zorba, who shows us his newfound power, but doesn't know about our newfound power. So during this fight, Zorba attacks sometimes and shields sometimes, but in both forms we do the same amount of damage, so he can't really do anything. This opens up the final dungeon for us, Tyrant Star, and once we go here, we can't get out. So I prepare by cooking as much Sublime Spoonfuls as I can, and we make our way to the star. While we're here, we can see most of the enemies are higher leveled than we are. We also have some boss enemies we have the choice to fight that are just rematches against humans we already defeated. If we don't fight them, the final battle against Luis will be a bit more difficult, and I'm pretty confident, but not that confident. So I fought all the bosses and then headed for Luis. Archdemon Luis is a boss just like the others. Just toss some ice cubes over to him. He has quite a few turns he can use though, and he is able to deal quite a lot of damage, but thanks to Hulkenberg's Royal Knight archetype, there's always a 30% chance he'll just get that attack reflected right back at him. But I did say that this boss was just like the others, so endurance. But after this battle, Luis runs away to his Skyrunner and we have to chase him. Once we do catch up to him, he uses this weird spell on Meta and he dies. But thankfully, we just get sent to Academia, which I haven't showed in this video, but it's like a place Meta goes when he falls asleep and he can make archetypes in there. And all we do here is fight an easy solo battle and then get revived. Unfortunately, we do get spawn camped and have to immediately fight Luis again. This time, he has become human, and he has 3 masks we can damage using magic items. He doesn't have too much health though, so we can take care of this easily and move on to the final fight against the Destroyer Sherardrius. And I thought this was the best opportunity I could ever get to use my best items. So, on turn 1, I started using every single one of my Sublime Spoonfuls and Stale Black Bread items to deal around 35,000 damage to Luis. On his turn, he removed any buffs we had, removed a turn icon we had, and gave himself more turn icons. I guess that makes things kind of fair, but on the second attacking turn he got, he wiped out everyone on the team except Meta, which is really scary because yeah, I'm a bit underleveled, but we've never been this close to losing. Since I only had 1 turn left, I decided to revive Hulkenberg, and on Luis's attacking turn, Meta gets lowered down to 1 hit, but reflects Luis's next attack. So I used my 1 turn I have to revive Heisme, since he's pretty good at avoiding attacks, but unfortunately he dodges too late and both Meta and Hulkenberg get downed. So I revive Meta, and on Luis's next turn, he downs Heisme at the same time Meta reflects an attack. So I revive Hulkenberg again, and both she and Meta survive multiple attacks, so we can revive Heisme again. But on that turn, Luis uses Thunderfang, which uses an element the Knight class is weak to. But I remembered to purify my fire-repelling shoes specifically so that wouldn't happen. This brings Luis down to 263 HP. The humble Flamma Bottle for 300 damage. And that is it. With Luis defeated, I can confidently say it is possible to beat Metaphor ReFantazio without using an archetype. This was a pretty fun video to make, but it was kinda easy since I know how to play the game. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure to check out some of my other videos while you're here. But yeah, that's all I got.